So I grew up around sound systems. So that's also a huge part of why I love house music. Where I grew up in South Florida, it was like the hip hop and the Miami bass and the West Indian stuff. So I grew up around pristine sounding sound systems that vibrated my skin. And so a lot of really good clubs where we hear house and techno have that. And I feel like I'm at home.
So today is October 26, 2021. Who are we speaking with?
This is Miss Al Boogie.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Born in Albany, New York, raised between upstate New York and Fort Lauderdale, Florida, moved to New York City when I came to college here and have lived here ever since.
How did you get the name Miss Al Boogie?
Someone gave it to me. I added the Miss, but a couple of people just started calling me that from the club and the street dance scene. Initially, I did not like it, but I couldn't stop people from calling me it. Like it just like kind of spiraled. And so I accepted it. And then I added the Miss because I noticed in online conversations, people would call me dude. And I was like, oh, let me just like add a little bit more clarity that I don't want to be treated like a man. So I added the Miss. Although I don't know which is better, but yeah. I just didn't want to be called dude anymore. How about that?
I love it. I love it. Tell us about the current state of house dance.
It blows my mind. I used to kind of gauge it based on people I knew, and it's far beyond that now. Like, I recently taught for this really incredible organization called She Is Hip Hop, and they had a house teacher from Africa teach as well, and I was like, what? Like, I don't really battle. I mean, I do. It would be a lie to say I didn't submit to any battles in the past year or two, but not that much. And this thing is everywhere. Now, it's also a controversial term because everybody has a different definition of it. There are people that say you're only house dancing if you're in the club. And then even that setting can be like needs to be kind of a little more defined because you can go to a club in Europe, but if they're not all dancing like we do in New York, you're not exactly house dancing. And then there's other people that go and teach classes and have never even lived in New York, never ever been around quote unquote pioneers of the scene, people from the garage, people from the loft, people from Red Zone, people from, I haven't been to any of those places. I've been to the anniversaries, but I'm a little too young for that. So it's a controversial term. I believe that I do it. There are people that dance house better than me that say, I am not a house dancer. So, but as far as the scene, I'm completely blown away by how it's in every niche of the globe, because when I had my interest in it, I felt like an anomaly. And yeah, now it's absolutely everywhere. I think it's on Mars.
I love that. What does house music mean to you?
Oh my gosh. Oh my God. I went to the shelter on Saturday. And I just was like, I just felt so fortunate. I probably took it more for granted prior to the pandemic. But it just hit such a specific chord in me, and clearly in all the people that were at the party as well. I love the soul of it. I like the harshness of it. I like the changing patterns and the rhythms. I love that Timmy will take something that we heard like 15 years ago and blend it into something completely different, or like I'm singing along to it, but it's a new song. I just love it so much. I can dance really hard, whether I'm in a tight crowd and or I have a large amount of space. And during the pandemic, I learned that the club is inside me, because when I couldn't go anywhere, I was getting it done. Still not the same thing, which is why I'm enjoying more. Oh, public records, sound system. Oh, good sound system. So I grew up around sound systems. So that's also a huge part of why I love house music. Where I grew up in South Florida, it was like the hip hop and the Miami bass and the West Indian stuff. So I grew up around pristine sounding sound systems that vibrated my skin. And so a lot of really good clubs where we hear house and techno have that. And I feel like I'm at home.
Well said. Explain the economics of house dance. And this is what I mean. If you're a DJ, maybe you get lucky, you put out some hit records, remixes, you get booked, you get a residency in Ibiza, you get a residency in Las Vegas, right? You travel around the world, right? If you're a dope ass house dancer, how does that work?
So, okay, so it's different for everyone if you're making money doing house dance. And then it's like also controversial because, like, are you really house dancing if you didn't learn it in the club, if you're not from New York or Chicago or spent a great amount of time there, or at least around the New York and Chicago heads? Like, there's all these like levels of interpretation. Excuse me. Please don't include that. All levels of interpretation. I like very specific types of movement, but that's not necessarily what gets people work. But as far as like mainstream professional dance, they do pull things from house dance movement. So for them, it is pretty good to have it, because I see stuff on the VMAs and in videos where they're throwing stuff in. They're doing that with other street styles too. But as far as the best way you're gonna get known and make money and people are gonna pay for you to travel is if you win a bunch of battles, especially if there's like a global eye on them, like in Europe and here in the US and in Asia. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't make a lot of money house dancing, but I do make money dancing. And my training in the club and my going off as a kid has really lent itself to my career. I would say that house dance is going to build more stamina probably than a lot of other movement. I notice that when I teach and I work, that we have a lot more stamina comparatively. So that is helpful. But yeah, like everything's cyclical. People pick and choose what kind of trend they want to be a part of or what thing they want to throw in for a gig. So it's good to have multiple income streams. Most of us have other jobs. Most of us do. Yeah, there's exceptions to the rule and people who make careers out of just dancing, but most of us do.
Let's talk about house dance. How much of house dance is codified by your location, by your region, by the club you went to, by the teacher that influenced you?
I mean, I only know my own experience here in New York. I've really kept tunnel vision around what the rest of the US is doing and globally. I do know some clashes that have come up historically across the pond and stuff. Maybe that's to my detriment, but I feel it's in my happy place. And my favorite movers tend to do a very New York, marinated in New York movement. Either they spent a lot of time here or a lot of time around people from here. I mean, there's people with dough that they spend $300 on private lessons with dope dancers. I've never been able to afford that. But luckily I live in a great place and can go out. So there are people who have a very firm codification of what house dance is. For some time, and most of them are in a crew called Dance Fusion. For a time, I was trying to follow their lead on the codification, but then I started getting confused by it. So I say both. Like there's a bunch of things that I learned that I never was told a name for, whether it was hiding that or whether people decided to give it a name later on. But the codification of a lot of the names right now of a lot of movements are created by Dance Fusion. But I've been on TikTok and I've seen somebody call a move I've done for years the reverse Roger Rabbit. And I never called it the reverse Roger Rabbit in my life. I never heard anybody else call it the reverse Roger Rabbit. So these things can get named, you know, even outside of this really kind of focal community too.
Fair point. Fair point. Talk to us about your transition from hip hop to house.
It basically was moving to New York.
How old were you?
How old was I when I moved to New York? 19.
Wow. What was that like? What was it like experiencing New York for the first time?
Well, I had always wanted to live here. And then like, you know, my family was kind of getting in the way, like, what do you want to go there for? And I was like, I'm going there. And I have roots here, but you know, white flight. So what was it like? So I didn't understand house music before I moved here, but this was like, let's say I moved here before we had YouTube and stuff. Yeah. So it was one of those things you actually had to experience. And I remember I was in my friend's car after the club when I still lived in Florida, and she was playing this really kind of beat up recording. I think it was of Junior Vasquez. And I was like, what is that? Like, and she was like, what's wrong with you? And like, we were both like rough with each other. But looking back, I think the context of a lot of music is that you need to hear it in a really good sound system and in the environment that it was created. So within my first year of living in New York, someone took me to Shelter and I was like, what is this? And I'm pretty obsessive. So I became pretty addicted pretty quickly. The songs that drew me in the most were the kind of more R&B sounding ones that like pulled me in. The like sing-songy with the hooks. And then over time, because I grew up around like booty bass and listened to a lot of hardcore hip hop, the more techie things grew on me. And I always wanted to hear something new. So that's why the kind of like other varieties of stuff started to grow on me more than the more sing-songy stuff. Now I like all of it. But there was some time where the sing-songy stuff, I was like, it's too nice, get it off of me. You know, a phase. But yeah, that's essentially what happened. And I had to see people in their element with it, and I had to see people dancing to it. And then I was like, oh, I see. I understand now. I mean, it was the beginning of my understanding. So, and the sound system culture is very much the same, like what I grew up with. So I was like, okay. You know, I had been to a few different clubs in New York where dance wasn't necessarily the priority. And I was having a hard time with that because even when I went in Florida, in South Florida, you can get into clubs fairly young. So I was doing it from when I was 15. Not that anybody knew, but that's what I was doing. And so, and then even I went roller skating as a kid, and looking back, that was very like kid club centered, and skating culture is a big thing up here too. So it wasn't that crazy of a transition. I just needed to know where to go. And then once I found it, yeah, it was over. And I'm really shocked. I'm really shocked at how youthful I feel when I go out, how much I still love it, how much it doesn't get old. Like, I'm surprised. I'm really surprised by that. that this is still, you know, I had school dances when I was a 12-year-old, 11-year-old, and I still feel that way when I go to a really good club night. Like I feel like I did then.
Describe the feeling when the DJ plays your jam.
Well, here's the thing though. It's a great feeling because I can hit all the nuances of the song. So it makes me really happy. There's like a huge musicality I can express. But I actually enjoy more when I hear something I've never heard before that is nasty. That is what gets me. But if they play my jam, I definitely like that that No One mix, that Maxwell No One mix. Who did that? It was a white label. But it was a mystery for a while who did it, at least prior to like social media. But that one comes on and I can hit Maxwell singing, I can hit the kicks, the hats, everything, just because I love how that song is remixed so much. But for the most part, what hits me is something I've never heard before, and it's like, what is this? Yeah.
Tell us about your New York City club journey. After the Shelter, what other clubs did you frequent?
Well, you know, I got here during post Giuliani era, so it was a little more limited for me. But I'll say some things that got us through were, you know, kind of like underground house parties. Little Ray's Jamboree is a big center of like figuring out where to go next. Shelter moved around a bit. You know, there was APT, there was CLO. Some of those clubs I don't like that much, but I would get to them because of how certain people played. I will say some of the smaller venues, I really taught myself how to dance in tight spaces. So that's like a skill set I developed when the club scene was shrinking, basically. Yeah, I mean, watching it change from being like Tribeca, Chinatown, Lower East Side, sometimes Soho, but never too much, meatpacking. And then essentially right now, I'm literally in the middle of the club scene where I live. Brooklyn is where the majority of clubs are. You know, I can ride my bike to a club. I mean, it's wild. I mean, when I first moved here, I wasn't that far away from that many either. But because I was going to NYU. But yeah, I've just watched it kind of like move around. And, you know, people who are really, it's difficult because people have to make money in order to keep clubs open in New York City. New York City is such an expensive place. So finding people who both want to keep a place open and curate is difficult. We had that a lot with Output. They had to close. You know, a lot of these things, I hate to sound like dark, but a lot of these things are inevitabilities with the way the New York City real estate market is. And it's with other things too. It's not just with clubs. So yeah, we've just been bouncing around to different places, but now we have Uber.
Which is not a club.
There was a time.
Yeah,
There was a time where it was just the train. That's it. And yeah, I wasn't finding a cab either. Like walking out at 4 a.m. You know, this one time I left Sapphire Lounge. I was walking home by myself at like 4 a.m. and I see 2 men driving a van and James Gandolfini between the 2 of them. I think they were probably heading to an early call for a shoot. I like waved at the van at James Gandolfini, like heading home from the club. I'm the only person that saw him.
Wow.
That was before Uber. So
Before
I
Uber,
wouldn't have seen James Gandolfini if we had Uber.
Mm-hmm.
Conclusion.
Um, describe your dance style.
Someone once told me I was like subtle and explosive or something like that. Sultry and explosive. I just be doing it. But I really, 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 really enjoy footwork, like so much, so much. And I enjoy isolations like all throughout my body, doing like multiple ones at a time. I love polyrhythm. I love being silly and playful. I make a lot of faces. I like the challenge of if I'm in a really tight space, can I go hard anyway without hitting anybody? And I would say that I'm pretty much led by my hips. Like that's the center of everything. But yeah, like I can go really hard, like when I pop, or soften it up, breathe. What my favorite thing to do is, now that we're back open again, is really taking the time at a party like Shelter to like ride a whole wave and like have this kind of marathon experience of like, okay, like I'm just gonna keep it kind of basic for 2 hours, and now everything is super warm and I can go bigger and larger and dance like crazy with other friends of mine. And then, at 7:30, wear myself out and sit my ass down. Did that explain it? Sometimes I have to have other people tell me. I'm like, what it look like? What's it look like? Pretty soulful. I did have someone once tell me, like, yell at me, like, you're like the Tina Marie of the dance floor. I was like, thank you. That is very kind. It was like, damn it. Like that.
That's a perfect segue into my next question. What role, if any, has, well, let me change the question. Has your race and or gender impacted the reception you've received on the dance floor?
Depends where I am. In South Florida, or rather North Florida, it had a big impact. And I was just talking to somebody about this.
Give us an example.
So I pretty much went to school with all Black folks. So that tended to be my norm and my comfort zone. Those, were my friendships. Those were who I danced with, those who I ran around and played with. Did we live in the same neighborhood? No, but I always would be there. And so I went to Florida State for a year in Tallahassee, which is kind of like South Georgia, North Florida. And I was behaving my normal self, and people who didn't know me were like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And I literally was saying to somebody a few days ago, like, being a woman there and being a white woman who hung out with all kinds of people and Black people in dancing was much more complicated than it was where I grew up. Not that it didn't have its own stuff, but I think I was so familiar with everybody it was around, it was less of a problem. And then when I moved to New York, it wasn't, and I went to like the club scene here, it's not something I ever noticed. It's become more of like, let's talk about how rooted in the African diaspora all this movement is more recently, which I'm definitely down with. Like, I was a white person surrounded by Black people dancing as a kid. I'm not gonna sit there and be like, it's white too. Like, I was like, it's clear that I'm a bit of an exception to the rule here. And so It's complex. I would say more recently, it's become a more noticeable thing for me, but that's also privileged as well. But looking back, I think with the club scene and what it is, like if there's a race and a class thing going on, if we're not a group of people that look elite and are making the bar a lot of money, they don't really want us around. And my favorite people are like working class club heads. Like they got it for the most part. I left the club the other night and someone was getting off their shift at juniors. And all I did was mention two things and they jumped right into the conversation. I was like, welcome, sir. Like, but I do know that the majority of the styles that I do are rooted in Blackness and rooted in Africanness. And some of that is becoming more explicit more recently, that we're really saying what it is. It's also, some blending. I won't go into detail with that. But I basically know footwork because I learned, when I was very young, my grandparents tap danced in the street for money during the Depression. So it ain't come from nowhere.
Interesting. Let's talk about Al Boogie, the recording artist. Tell us about your album.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad I have something to tell. So this newest album, it's not going to be coming out for a few more months, but I have a single coming out. When this podcast comes out, it'll be available. It's called For a Short Time. And it's the first single of 6 songs that I started working on, and I wrote everything in 2019 and I produced most everything in 2020. And then I've been basically like fine tuning and mixing and mastering this year. So it took me some time, mostly because I required myself to produce everything and I hadn't done that before. So I was being both gentle with myself and dealing with a lot of technical difficulties being a noob and just working them out. So the songs that I made prior to this album, I either hired a producer or I hired an engineer to be like, do this for me, do this for me, do this for me, and I produced it. Whereas this one, I did everything, the recording, the instruments, everything on my own, except for the mixing and mastering. So this next album is totally dance focused, but multiple genres within dance music. And the first song that's coming out, it's definitely, it sounds like it's from today, but you can totally hear an old school hip house vibe to it. It's called For a Short Time. And everything will be out, a video, a single, it'll be on all streaming platforms and on my Bandcamp by the time this podcast is released.
Great, we'll look forward to it. Tell us about, I feel like one time house and hip hop were one and they separated, right? And I also feel like there are two house scenes. There's this is maybe an oversimplification, but just, work with me on this. I feel like there's the one house scene, which is kind of like the underground scene where we come from, where people want to go dance. A black box is fine, no lights is fine, no guest list is fine, no velvet rope is fine, right?
Need lights, but okay, go ahead.
Yeah, some lights. Yeah, I prefer lights too, but then at some point the scene bifurcated. Then you have sort of the EDM scene. Talk about the different scenes. How are they similar, if any? How are they different? And how does that impact or influence where and how you go out?
I just like what I like. And if it's something, well, I also like hearing new things. So, I'll hear a new thing and may not like it. I'll just be like, that's not for me. So there is some EDM stuff that is not for me, and some of it is for me. I mean, I also like a lot of pop music, so EDM wouldn't be that far-fetched for me to like. I like other forms of music besides house and hip hop, but some I like and some I don't. I tend to not party in EDM settings, like the big festivals and stuff. I've had people be like, you should go audition to be a shuffler, which is like this very footworking based dance that they get hired to do at all these EDM festivals. And I'm pretty finicky. And if I don't want to do something for a job, I don't want to. And I've gotten like people be like, are you going to go try this? And I just like sweetly ignore the message. Like, I don't want to work at that festival. I just don't take all kinds of money. I'm just picky like that. And but you know, I like a nice sound system. I like decent lights. You know, I'll go party with my friends outside. Outside was great during shutdowns. Do I like dancing on concrete? No. Did I do it because I had to? And it was a survival mechanism? Yes. But you know, I like a nice club with a nice floor and lights and decent sound. And but you know, if I got friends that are throwing something in a backyard of the school and they got taste, I'm going to that party. Like, so I think for me, it's just a matter of like taste and what I like and what I want to go see. I didn't make it to the Black Coffee Louis Vega thing that happened. That was like epic, that everybody talked about, which was like a whole different, like it was a little EDM vibe, but it was a big house music thing. And it was, I couldn't afford it. Like I already had like tickets to like 2 parties that weekend. I was like, I can't go to a third. I have to pay rent. But like that was definitely, I think, a point in 2021 where it was kind of like EDM culture, but also house music, because the crowd was, Redness once explained this to me. She's like, if there's online ticketing, you're gonna get new people coming. Like they're gonna see it on Eventbrite or whatever, and they're gonna buy the tickets. And I believe what she said. Because even when I was at Shelter the other night, I wouldn't say a lot of the people that were there in the earlier end were anybody I really recognized, and they were having a good time. So there's some overlaps there where almost like EDM people can be attracted to the house and techno stuff, and the house and techno people can kind of be booked sometimes on the EDM stuff. But you ain't gonna see me at an EDM festival. I mean, unless you book me to play there.
Or shuffle.
I'm not gonna go as a patron. The vibe is not my thing. But I mean, I like Movement Festival. I like that. And I want to go to Croatia so bad for their festival in the summer. So there's certain things I want to go to just because of like, I'll see the lineup and it's my taste. But you know, in New York, I do like to explore and see new stuff and be like, what's that sound like? And then if it ain't for me, I just don't go again.
What is your intention when you dance?
To be free, to let loose, to see what my body can do, like if I'm able to push it. And then sometimes if I have a little bit of a limitation, like I'm hurt or something, what can I do? Like how much can I explore within that limitation? It's definitely, I'm really grateful for my body. It's definitely where I feel the most freedom is with dancing. You know, whatever, you know, we just were in 4 years of 45. That was very, very difficult. But dance still happened and clubs still happened. And so, and the people that we like and like to be around still happened. So that was a big part. It definitely was a lifesaver during the pandemic. It made me realize how much I relied on it and needed. It's literally the first thing I did as soon as they were like, okay, we're closing everything. There were some of my friends who were like, they couldn't dance for months. And for me, I was like, oh, I'm turning on Instagram and I'm just gonna go. Like it was the first thing I relied on. So dance and music are both a huge, I was going through some mental health stuff and I kind of alluded to it on Instagram. And I went to this great performance of Passion Fruit Dance and Soul Summit and St. James Joy DJs. And somebody was like, oh, I'm surprised to see you here because of your mental health stuff. And I'm like, this part is easy. Me getting to another spot in Brooklyn where the music is going to be great and my friends are going to be performing, that's the easy thing for me to do. So yeah, it's hard to say I've ever had like a near-death experience, but at the same time, dance is a lifesaver and a life giver. I'm really surprised that I've spent this much time relying on it. I thought it would be, just like a kind of childhood, like early 20s joy, because there's people that do stop. I am not one of those people.
What do you want your legacy to be?
I don't concern myself so much with legacy. I concern myself with authenticity and empathy in the present, and growing and learning from, both my traumas and any harm that I've caused like other people. And if y'all want to talk about me when I'm gone, that's fine. I don't really I know we all die. I don't really like to think about that too much. I really like to think about how much life I have right now and what I'm doing and doing the things I enjoy. And the things I enjoy are working in film and TV, making dances, making dance videos, making music, singing, hearing other people's music, seeing other people's dances, being with my friends and family that I love, being social, and just having a more just world. Like, can we just keep it going? Can we push it? Those are the things I'm most concerned with, doing no harm, but taking no shit. And, making incremental steps forward on all the things I like to make. If anything, I'm really proud of myself this year. If nobody likes these songs, I'm super proud of them because I did it all by myself and really challenged myself to get the work done. And it was fun doing it. So, I ain't mad at none of it. But yeah, I really don't think too much about legacy. If y'all want to do stuff with my legacy, fine. I don't really want holograms or stuff. Not that I'll ever be that famous for something like that to happen. I'm not really interested in you keeping me going while I'm gone. But honestly, I'm more concerned about how I am with my life now.
Is there anything that I didn't ask that you want to talk about?
Sure. Yeah, I've made a bunch of dance videos over the past year. And I'm gonna keep making more. They've been really a beautiful labor of love, and creativity, and my editing is getting faster. I'm like, who am I? So yeah, people can, if they haven't seen them already or want to watch them again, they're on my YouTube channel, and I mostly put them on Instagram on my video. There's going to be more coming out, and how about this? There's going to be one with every song I put out. So yeah, so the dance video thing has been happening more since I shot 2 before the pandemic started, and then I did more, throughout the pandemic. And then I had a requirement that I needed to put one out every month this year. So I'll have another one coming out, but it'll coincide. It'll be to the song For a Short Time, but it'll be its own dance video as well. And yeah, I'm really super proud of those. Some of the songs are old school, some of them are current. I mixed everything myself. There's like a Mary Jane Girl song that I took like 2 different versions of it and mashed it up and mixed it together. And so yeah, and then I think adding to that, just that I do the whole process. I shoot it, I edit it, I mix the music, like, and they're fun.
Awesome. I'll link to all of those in the when the interview goes live.
Great, thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and I'll ping you when it goes live.
Thank you so much, Moema. It was my pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.